This woman is remarkable. After discovering her husband's infidelity, her reaction was simply, "You shouldn't have gotten caught." She then continued playing the role of a loving wife, making others envious. Her difficult mother-in-law disapproved of her and threw a newspaper at her. In response, the woman knocked all the cups off the table, shocking her mother-in-law. This woman, O Wansu, was a former professional golfer who married into a wealthy family and served as a goodwill ambassador for the United Nations. Her main role was fundraising to aid innocent civilians affected by war. Recently, she helped a young girl who became a beneficiary of O Wansu's support after terrorists killed her family and took her hostage. Fortunately, the girl was rescued. O Wansu found her a lawyer, collected evidence, and brought the terrorists to the international court. Upon hearing this, the terrorists sent threatening emails to O Wansu. Despite the personal safety risks, she continued with her schedule and traveled to Manila to persuade business tycoons to donate at a charity auction. Just before the auction, O Wansu visited a jewelry store to pick up a necklace she intended to auction off. As she was leaving the store, a nearby gunman aimed at her. Gunshots rang out, hitting someone beside her and splattering blood on O Wansu, terrifying her. A man with a pistol, named Seo Do-yoon, came to her aid, called her by name, and helped her escape. They successfully drove away. Do-yoon, a former police officer from Korea, had come to Manila 3 months earlier with a friend. Unfortunately, his friend was murdered by a masked killer. When Do-yoon arrived at the scene, he heard the killer say, "The flowers have been delivered to the florist," while his dying friend mentioned a photo. To investigate his friend's murder, Do-yoon stayed in the city gathering information. Before rescuing O Wansu, he was at a casino where he overheard some thugs talking about a killer named L, who had killed a Korean police officer months ago, referring to Do-yoon's friend. The thugs mentioned a boss, and Do-yoon, disguised as a janitor, entered the boss's office. There, a man carrying a bag of money arrived, and Do-yoon recognized him in the mirror as his acquaintance, Senior Park. Park also mentioned a florist's delivery, reminding Do-yoon of the killer's words. Do-yoon learned from the thugs that Killer L was about to strike on Luxury Street. Armed, he rushed to the location and coincidentally saved O Wansu from the attack. Do-yoon took her to his place to hide, avoiding anyone who might track their escape route. O Wansu wanted to call the police, but Do-yoon pointed out that there could be insiders in the police force, making it dangerous to reveal their location. O Wansu had no choice but to agree. After they arrived at Do-yoon's place, he bandaged his wounds, and O Wansu came over to help, asking how he knew her. Do-yoon explained that she was a famous golfer, and everyone in Korea knew her. He then handed her a towel to wipe the blood off her face. O Wansu went to the bathroom, but tripped, and Do-yoon caught her, his gentle gesture making her heart flutter. Later, Do-yoon took her to the embassy, where her husband picked her up. On the way, he scolded her for coming there despite the terrorists' threats. O Wansu was too exhausted to respond. That night, alone, she kept recalling how Do-yoon had protected her, appreciating his care and kindness, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, Do-yoon touched the scar from a kidney transplant surgery, a gift from a friend. As a witness, he had written a statement about the incident. Park, who was responsible for O Wansu's safety, read it and recognized Do-yoon's name. Park knew Do-yoon and invited him to meet. After learning about the ordeal, Park invited Do-yoon to join his team working for the florist, a nickname for the Wayne Group, which was O Wansu's family business, to investigate his friend's death. Do-yoon agreed. The next day, despite her husband's objections and the risks, O Wansu held a press conference, admitting that she had been attacked and threatened, but vowed to stand against these evil forces. After the press conference, she prepared for a party hosted by her family's foundation. Recognizing Do-yoon among the bodyguards, she composed herself and entered the venue with her husband to applause. Facing the guests, she remembered her past. She dropped out of high school to work as a caddy to support herself. Her mother, seeing how professional players were making good money in the US, encouraged her to go abroad. O Wansu didn't disappoint, winning 20 championships in a decade and being inducted into the Hall of Fame. She became a successful professional golfer, earning over 10 billion Korean won in prize money. But sadly, her mother, who was addicted to gambling, squandered all of it. Out of frustration, O Wansu cut ties with her mother and decided to donate all her future earnings to charity, marking the start of her philanthropic journey. At an event, while O Wansu was busy mingling with guests, a child approached her, feeling sleepy and wanting to go to bed. She went to find the child's sister, who was supposed to be looking after him. only to find her husband cheating with the sister. They both tried to explain that it wasn't what it looked like, but O Wansu wasn't surprised. She had known about her husband's infidelity for a while. Her immediate concern was to make sure the reporters outside didn't catch them, to avoid a scandal. After leaving the room, she still held her husband's hand, pretending to be a loving couple in front of the public. Only Do Yoon, who was close to O Wansu, noticed the tension between them. After the party, still feeling disturbed, O Wansu was confronted by her mother-in-law, who, aware of her son's affair, was surprised at O Wansu's strategic approach in not seeking a divorce. In a fit of anger, her mother-in-law hit her with a newspaper. In response, O Wansu calmly pushed all the cups off the table. Despite all the turmoil, she continued her charitable activities, determined to protect the family's reputation and wealth, and not to leave her marriage so easily. Her furious mother-in-law even threatened to kill her one day. That night, feeling overwhelmed, O Wansu went to a bar alone to drown her sorrows. She thought back to when she first met her husband at a charity event in Africa, where they volunteered together for 10 days. Before leaving, he had proposed to her, and they both looked forward to their marriage. At that time, O Wansu had no idea what challenges the marriage would bring. Her first encounter with her mother-in-law was tough, but O Wansu stood her ground, acknowledging her humble background while attributing her success to her hard work, not anyone else's support. Her mother-in-law tried to intimidate her by claiming she had killed her son's ex-girlfriend, which frightened O Wansu, though it turned out to be a joke. After some negotiation, the mother-in-law agreed to the marriage and even promised an expensive wedding dress, but then handed a prenuptial and confidentiality agreement to O Wansu's brother, offering him a job on the condition that he tell O Wansu he and their mother had moved abroad. Eventually, O Wansu married into the wealthy family, beginning a 12-year marriage that has now reached its breaking point. Meanwhile, Do Yoon, who happened to be nearby, saw O Wansu drunk. Initially, he didn't want to get involved, but after reconsidering, he decided to check on her. O Wansu stumbled out of the bar, and Do Yoon followed her to her room. She spilled the contents of her bag while searching for her room key, and Do Yoon stepped in to help pick everything up. Seeing him, O Wansu asked, "Should I just stay with you tonight? Do you want to stay with me?" Do Yoon didn't answer but supported her as they entered the room. Just as he was about to leave, her husband knocked on the door. O Wansu pulled Do Yoon back, stopping him from opening it. Her husband noticed the room key outside and grew suspicious. Luckily, Director Park appeared, explaining that O Wansu was drunk and had dropped her key by accident. Her husband's doubts were dispelled, and he left. Director Park slid the room key under the door, avoiding a disaster. Do Yoon left with mixed feelings. O Wansu, also conflicted, changed into her pajamas. After that night, she began to notice Do Yoon more. When he returned home, Do Yoon moved into O Wansu's in-laws mansion with the bodyguard team. While tidying up, Do Yoon accidentally knocked over a photo frame containing a picture of him and a friend. Remembering his friend's last words about a photo, he took a closer look and discovered a memory card hidden inside. The card contained surveillance footage showing O Wansu's father-in-law being taken out, covered by a white sheet. At that moment, Do Yoon realized there was more to the father-in-law's death, which explained why his friend had left the video as evidence. Chaebol families are truly chaotic. This man had two wives simultaneously. The younger wife wanted to use her son to improve her status and become the main wife. Seeing through her ambitions, the elder wife took everyone by surprise. The illegitimate child everyone had heard rumors about was actually the son of O Wansu's late father-in-law. Do Yoon was in Manila investigating his friend's murder when he coincidentally saved a wealthy lady, O Wansu, from a terrorist attack. Afterward, he was invited to become her bodyguard. Back in their country, Do Yoon accidentally found a memory card his friend had hidden. It contained surveillance videos showing O Wansu's father-in-law being wheeled out covered with a white sheet. Do Yoon suspects foul play in his death and believes the same person who killed his friend is also targeting O Wansu. Concerned for her safety, he vows to protect her at all costs. "Don't trust anyone from now on. Stay by my side and I'll keep you safe," he told her. O Wansu was torn, unsure whether she could trust Do Yoon. That night, Do Yoon looked at a photo of himself and his friend, lost in thought. 2 years ago, both Do Yoon and his friend were bodyguards. Do Yoon was assigned to the Blue House to protect the president, while his friend was assigned to the police department's intelligence division. The police chief demanded that Do Yoon report the details of the president's meetings with businessmen and their discussions. Meanwhile, his friend was tasked with investigating these businessmen and tracking where their secret funds flowed. All findings had to be reported directly to the chief. During the investigation, his friend discovered that the HNE group had hired a gang called the Backing Gang to launder money. After O Wansu's father-in-law, the honorary chairman of the Hne group, died unexpectedly, murder was suspected. To dig deeper into the money laundering and uncover the true cause of death, his friend went to Manila alone, where the Backing Gang's headquarters and illegal casino were located. Tragically, his friend was killed in Manila. Unable to let his friend's death go unpunished, Do-yoon went to Manila to find the truth. That's why he happened to be at the scene of the attack and saved O Wansu. In fact, O Wansu was also aware of the H&E group's involvement in money laundering. Now, she no longer wants her managed consortium to be used as a tool for laundering family money. She intends to make the consortium independent, free from her mother-in-law's and husband's interference. When she shared this plan with her mother-in-law, the terrorist attack happened, delaying her plans. After taking care of business matters, O Wansu found time to meet with her husband's mistress. Even though she had known about her husband's affair and the existence of an illegitimate child, O Wansu never thought about divorcing him. The mistress had once been her husband's secretary and later bore his child. However, her husband, notorious for his affairs, had a scandalous encounter with a female artist at a hotel, which resulted in the artist's accidental death. To suppress the scandal, O Wansu's mother-in-law, who valued her good public image and extensive volunteer work, encouraged her son to approach O Wansu with a donation in Africa and use their marriage to cover up the scandal. Meanwhile, the mistress remained by the husband's side with their illegitimate child, and they referred to each other as sisters. "You're not planning to divorce, are you?" the mistress asked. "Yes, just stay as the second wife forever," O Wansu responded. O Wansu, angry, and returned home, where her mother-in-law, who had never approved of her, intentionally humiliated her by announcing she would bring the son's illegitimate child home. O Wansu firmly opposed this and wanted her husband to send the mistress and child abroad to avoid public disgrace. Her husband said he would discuss it with his mother first, not committing directly to O Wansu. She thought her in-laws would handle the matter discreetly to save face, but was shocked when her mother-in-law allowed the illegitimate child to stay. The day the family photo was taken, the mother-in-law arranged for the illegitimate child to enter the country, much to O Wansu's dismay. Her weak-willed husband couldn't go against his mother or look O Wansu in the eye. The mother-in-law brought up the issue of succession, considering O Wansu's own child had passed away years ago, something they had kept private to avoid scandal. Now, with a child ready to take on the role, the mother-in-law eagerly positioned him as the heir. With no prospects of having more children and unwilling to divorce, O Wansu felt she had no choice but to accept this unfair situation. During the family photo, her mother-in-law's triumphant smile stood in stark contrast to O Wansu's angry expression. Later, without O Wansu's permission, her mother-in-law had her deceased child's room cleared out for the illegitimate child. Enraged, O Wansu drove off alone, almost getting into an accident. Worried for her, Seo Doi-un got into the passenger seat and they drove in silence until O Wansu walked barefoot along the beach. Seo Doi-un followed quietly, keeping a close watch. After a long walk, he gently brushed the sand off her feet and helped her put on her shoes again. Knowing she shouldn't get too close, O Wansu advised Seo Doi-un to remain in his role as a bodyguard. She needed proof before she could believe his claim that the person who killed his friend and the one who attacked her were the same. After clearing her mind on the beach, O Wansu and Seo Doi-un arrived at a villa. Her husband, suspecting she'd be there, followed. Their relationship was strained, and he couldn't understand why she kept her distance without wanting a divorce. He tried to force intimacy, suggesting they have another child. Seo Doi-un, seeing O Wansu resist, intervened to ensure her safe departure, and they left together in silence. After O Wansu left, her frustrated husband met with another woman. The lover wasn't fazed and showed up at the hotel the next day, waking up the sleeping woman, saying, "I'm his second wife now, leave." The husband was indifferent to her, and while the lover persisted, she only wanted to know if O Wansu was considering having another child. The husband didn't respond and walked out. Do-yoon then visited the Wayne group. After finishing his business, he reviewed the video left by his friend. He discovered that the location where O Wansu's father-in-law was seen being wheeled out under a white sheet wasn't the family mansion. Do-yoon was convinced that O Wansu's father-in-law had been murdered and his friend killed to cover it up, all likely connected to the H group. With his investigation confirmed, he began looking for more evidence in the mansion. While the control room was unoccupied, he copied security footage showing a large amount of money, around 1 billion Korean won, on O Wansu's husband's desk, which piqued his interest. Meanwhile, O Wansu was confronting her evil mother-in-law. The more her mother-in-law tried to suppress her, the more O Wansu resisted. She had the servants remove the new furniture from her child's room, and then sealed off the room, forbidding anyone from entering. The mother-in-law, thinking there were plenty of other rooms in the mansion, didn't argue, but her next move shocked O Wansu. That day, O Wansu received a resignation letter. Her mother-in-law planned to take over her position as chairperson. Unable to tolerate any more oppression, O Wansu leaked information about her husband's affair, making him a target for media scrutiny. As public opinion turned, Wayne Group's stock price plummeted. The public, who trusted and admired O Wansu, naturally criticized the HNE Group, dragged into the scandal by her ineffectual husband. Confused, her mother-in-law watched as O Wansu seized the chance to position herself as the future leader of the company, a move she fiercely opposed. Her mother-in-law demanded that O Wansu keep a low profile and stay home to avoid causing more trouble. Although O Wansu seemed to agree, she secretly planned to hold a press conference the next day. The following day, O Wansu went out with her mother-in-law, but halfway through their outing, she sent away her mother-in-law's companions and, with Seo Doi-un by her side, arrived at the press conference. In front of numerous reporters, O Wansu denied the rumors about her husband's affair and claimed that the supposed illegitimate child was actually her late father-in-law's son. Watching O Wansu confidently spin this story left everyone, including her husband and mother-in-law, stunned. Her husband and mother-in-law could only let out some awkward laughs as they watched the live broadcast. Despite being caught off guard, her mother-in-law still insisted that O Wansu step down from her position as chairperson. However, O Wansu remained resolute, refusing to let her mother-in-law take over the company. She threatened to hold another press conference to expose the Wayne Group's money laundering activities if pushed too far. Knowing that this couldn't be exposed, her mother-in-law was forced to back down. O Wansu then welcomed her husband's lover and the illegitimate child into the mansion, stating that since the lover had become a second wife, she had the right to live there too. The three women began living together in a tense and strange arrangement. O Wansu tolerated this disgraceful marriage solely to protect the company for the sake of her late father-in-law. He had trusted her deeply, aware of the fragile unity between her and her husband, but still wanted her to stay until the right moment to leave. O Wansu, on a mission, was willing to endure anything. Seo Doi-un, feeling sorry for her situation, feared she might meet the same fate as her father-in-law. Sensing O Wansu's doubt, he shared the truth he had uncovered. The killer of his friend, who had also attacked her, might be someone within her own household. Despite the danger, O Wansu focused on her charitable work, establishing a welfare center through the company. On the day of the opening ceremony, O Wansu and her mother-in-law wore matching outfits and posed closely for photos at the request of reporters, with O Wansu overshadowing her mother-in-law. After the ceremony, her mother-in-law, seething with anger, took it out on the bodyguards in the training room, taking them down one by one. When it was Do-yoon's turn, she couldn't lay a hand on him. Unlike the others, he didn't hold back and threw her to the ground with a shoulder throw. Her mother-in-law was impressed by Do-yoon's skill and attitude, looking forward to challenging him again. After calming down, her mother-in-law called O Wansu and suddenly mentioned that her mother, who was in a psychiatric hospital, was in very poor health and suggested that O Wansu and her brother visit her. Shocked to learn her mother's true whereabouts, O Wansu went to the hospital, which looked like a prison, with her brother. Do-yoon stood guard outside the room and rushed in when he heard O Wansu scream. The mistress of the house was outrageously bold, not only living under the same roof as the wife, but also bringing her own mother to convince O Wansu to divorce. Recently, O Wansu found out from her mother-in-law that her long-lost mother was in a psychiatric hospital. When O Wansu visited, she found her mother confused and unrecognizable, only remembering her daughter as a golfer in the United States. Her mother regretted gambling away the money O Wansu had worked so hard to earn. O Wansu recalled how her debt-ridden mother struggled to buy her a plane ticket to the US to chase her dreams. Seeing her mother's gray hair, O Wansu wanted to make amends, but her mother's life was coming to an end. Before she died, her mother apologized to O Wansu, who broke down in tears. Do-yoon comforted her, allowing her to release her emotions. O Wansu's brother took care of the funeral arrangements, giving her the chance to leave early for a business meeting with her mother-in-law. Although she wanted to stay for her mother's funeral, her mother-in-law threatened her with a business deal, forcing her to attend the meeting. Distracted during the meeting, O Wansu finally received her mother's last letter from her brother after the funeral. O Wansu decided to go off the grid, turning off their phones and disabling the GPS in their car, along with Do-yoon. Despite their efforts to stay hidden, someone secretly took pictures of them in front of a reliable Do-yoon. O Wansu showed her vulnerable side as her mother-in-law forbade a public funeral to avoid any scandal, forcing O Wansu to bid farewell in this private manner. Someone captured this on camera as O Wansu and Do-yoon scattered her mother's ashes at sea, releasing past grievances without forgiving those responsible for her mother's confinement. The photos were sent to her mother-in-law, who kept them from her son. When O Wansu and Do-yoon returned, they faced her enraged husband and mother-in-law. Her husband, upset about their disappearance, hit Do-yoon and threatened to fire him. The mother-in-law, understanding O Wansu's temperament, knew she wouldn't easily let go of Do-yoon. She didn't voice her opinion, but privately rebuked her son for overreacting, as this could lead others to suspect something between O Wansu and Do-yoon, potentially fueling rumors that could tarnish the family's reputation. To maintain appearances, the mother-in-law instructed Chief Park to let O Wansu decide Do-yoon's fate. That evening, O Wansu checked on Do-yoon's injuries. Do-yoon pulled her into his room and confessed his feelings, acknowledging the painful life she had in the mansion and expressing his desire to take her away, if possible. However, for O Wansu, it was more important to uncover the conspiracy behind a terrorist attack and its connection to Do-yoon's friend. Do-yoon showed O Wansu a video left by his friend, hinting that her father-in-law's death was suspicious and that the same person who targeted her father-in-law and tried to kill O Wansu was also responsible for his friend's death. They needed to investigate further. O Wansu trusted Do-yoon and asked him to uncover the truth quickly, vowing not to let anyone dismiss him before then. As they spoke, Chief Park knocked. Do-yoon initially wanted O Wansu to leave through the back door, but she confidently allowed Chief Park in, explaining they were discussing the terrorist incident. After Chief Park left, Do-yoon went out under the cover of night to a casino run by the 8 Stars gang, hoping to meet the manager. The manager, seeing Do-yoon as an unknown person on surveillance, refused to meet and sent a screenshot of the footage to Chief Park. Disturbed by Do-yoon's appearance at the casino, Chief Park summoned him the next day and questioned his presence there. The quick response confirmed to Do-yoon that Chief Park was connected to the 8 Stars gang and likely knew the cause of his friends and O Wansu's father-in-law's deaths. Chief Park only admitted that he laundered money for O Wansu's husband and that her father-in-law died suddenly during an intimate encounter, secretly returning to the mansion to avoid scandal, and claimed he died of a heart attack. Chief Park warned Do-yoon that serving a powerful family often meant navigating tight situations and cautioned him against reckless actions. Do-yoon remained determined to continue his investigation and shared everything he had learned with O Wansu that night. O Wansu suggested Do-yoon also look into Attorney Han, who managed the family and company's secret funds and likely knew many secrets. Attorney Han had an affair with O Wansu's mother-in-law years ago. O Wansu's husband, then a child, had witnessed his mother with Attorney Han and feared his father finding out. The mother-in-law remained calm, knowing her husband was already aware. Watching his mother leave calmly deeply hurt the child. In the present, besides instructing Do-yoon to continue the investigation, O Wansu took several actions on her own. She discovered that her mother-in-law planned to collaborate with her younger daughter-in-law's family to launder money through their cosmetics company. To prevent these illegal activities, O Wansu deliberately endorsed a product from a competing company. When a new product line was launched at the cosmetics company, it overshadowed the daughter-in-law's business, causing her to lose her temper. She angrily revealed that she was once considered a match for O Wansu's husband. O Wansu listened without reacting, and the daughter-in-law stormed off afterward. Later, O Wansu visited a welfare center and enjoyed a lovely day dining with the children there. On her way back, her vehicle was suddenly attacked by several drones. Do-yoon, noticing the danger in the rearview mirror, quickly sped up to try and escape. Despite his efforts, one of the drones hit directly under the car, causing it to veer off the road and injuring the passengers. The remote-controlled drone bombs were deployed by a female bodyguard from the HNE group. After confirming that the occupants were motionless, the bodyguard left on a motorcycle. Later, another bodyguard managed to crawl out of the wrecked vehicle. When Do-yoon regained consciousness, he pulled O Wansu from the back seat. Just as they moved away from the car, it exploded, sending debris flying into Do-yoon's back. Severely injured, he gently laid O Wansu on the ground before collapsing himself. All three were rushed to the hospital. Do-yoon and the other bodyguard were stabilized and were no longer in life-threatening condition. O Wansu, protected by Do-yoon, suffered only minor injuries. As Do-yoon was moved to the ICU, the female bodyguard intended to continue her attack but was deterred by the hospital's surveillance cameras. She had to call someone to report the failed mission. The attack on O Wansu and her companions received extensive media coverage, impacting Way Group stock prices. The mother-in-law enlisted Attorney Han to get the police chief to help suppress the media frenzy, regardless of whether the culprit was caught. However, Do-yoon, not following orders, used his police contacts while still recovering to obtain surveillance footage from near the accident site. Meanwhile, O Wansu's husband, also concerned about the police investigation, had Chief Park inquire at the police station. Learning that the police had found nothing, the husband gave Chief Park a large sum of money to seek help from the 8 Stars gang. A few days later, O Wansu had recovered. The female bodyguard, who had tried to kill her under the mother-in-law's arrangement, became O Wansu's personal bodyguard. Before being discharged, O Wansu visited Do-yoon, feeling moved and indebted to the man who had risked his life to protect her. Do-yoon asked for nothing more than to continue protecting O Wansu. She tearfully caressed his wounds and was embraced by Do-yoon, cherishing the brief moment of warmth. After leaving the hospital, O Wansu immersed herself in work and asked her brother for the consortium's ledgers. Her brother bluntly stated that he only had a falsified version and that the original was with Attorney Han. If the original were exposed, only he and O Wansu would be scapegoated. For safety reasons, he refused to give her the ledgers, causing her much frustration. Back home, she also had to deal with her husband. That day, her husband and his mother confronted O Wansu, with the mother urging them to divorce. O Wansu refused and warned that if her husband didn't settle down, she would drive him out and keep his son. Frightened, the husband and his mother no longer dared to challenge O Wansu's authority. Shortly after O Wansu's discharge, Do-yoon returned to the mansion. Chief Park visited to check on him, and they discussed the suspicious death of O Wansu's father-in-law again, learning that Chief Park had once more facilitated a payment to the 8 Stars gang on behalf of O Wansu's husband. Do-yoon urgently wanted to understand the reasons and pleaded for Chief Park's help in investigating. That night, O Wansu approached Do-yoon, asking him to retrieve the original consortium ledger from Attorney Han's study. Concerned about the dangers O Wansu might face by meddling with consortium secrets, Do-yoon tried to dissuade her. Unwilling to wait and lacking leverage against her mother-in-law, O Wansu insisted, and Do-yoon reluctantly agreed to help. Do-yoon took the opportunity to observe Attorney Han's guest house, which lacked surveillance to conceal identities. Blocked by a large guard dog at the entrance, he cleverly retrieved an item carrying Attorney Han's scent from his car and bypassed the obstacle. Unaware that the barking dog had alerted the female bodyguard to his presence, Do-yoon considered using Attorney Han's fingerprint to gain entry to the house. In the pantry, he found a used cup with a lipstick mark, knowing Attorney Han often used lip balm. Do-yoon copied the fingerprint from the glass onto a special mold to create a fake finger, which allowed him to unlock the guesthouse door. Inside, he searched the study and noticed a safe, but didn't know the combination. He installed a surveillance device in an alarm clock facing the safe to gather clues. After placing his backpack near the door, Do-yoon accidentally moved a box and discovered the original consortium ledger. Taking the ledger, he left just as Attorney Han, alerted by the female bodyguard, returned to check the safe for the group's secret financial ledger. Relieved it was still there, he soon realized the original ledger was missing. Do-yoon immediately went to O Wansu with the ledger, suggesting he keep it for her safety. Unexpectedly, prosecutors arrived with a search and arrest warrant for O Wansu's brother, accusing him of embezzling consortium assets. The sudden event left O Wansu distraught, and Do-yoon gently held her hand to comfort her. O Wansu's husband walked in, witnessing the scene and staring at them in shock, unable to say a word. Later, O Wansu visited her brother, who appeared calm and unafraid of being scapegoated by the Way Group, as he knew insider details about the secret funds and managed the financial accounts enough to make the group wary. Facing lawyer Han, her brother remained composed, suspecting that the search scandal was orchestrated by O Wansu's brother-in-law. Indeed, the brother-in-law, who had long been overlooked by the family and lacked inheritance rights like O Wansu's husband, felt aggrieved and saw this as an opportunity to suppress O Wansu and her husband, aiming to reclaim what he believed he deserved. Lawyer Han, aware that O Wansu's brother held critical information about the Wei group, promised to bail him out quickly to avoid implicating the group. Privately, he instructed his nephew not to act rashly, saying he would handle the situation. Lawyer Han had a plan in mind. Knowing Du Yun had stolen the original ledgers, he shifted the blame for reporting O Wansu's brother to Du Yun. The mother-in-law, trusting Lawyer Han's words, called O Wansu for questioning and confronted her about stolen intimate photos with Soon, shocked. O Wansu admitted she had instructed Du Yun to retrieve the ledgers but maintained their innocence. The mother-in-law concluded that Du Yun was manipulative and trying to get close to the naive O Wansu, becoming furious. Worried that her mother-in-law might harm Du Yun, O Wansu promised to retrieve the ledger soon. Confused by her mother-in-law's accusations, O Wansu confronted Du Yun, who explained the suspicious content of the ledgers, showing secret funds flowing into accounts under her and her brother's names, implicating them, but actually turning out to be under the mother-in-law's control. Du Yun insisted on keeping the ledgers to confront the mother-in-law while investigating her secrets. O Wansu, fearing that openly opposing her mother-in-law could put Du Yun in danger, felt helpless. But Du Yun, unconcerned for his own safety, was determined to protect O Wansu at all costs. Deeply moved, O Wansu embraced Du Yun, feeling strengthened by his support to face any challenge. Unbeknownst to her, the mother-in-law was plotting against her once again. As news of O Wansu's brother's alleged misappropriation of corporate assets spread, the mother-in-law, worried about the HNE group's reputation, plotted with Lawyer Han to fabricate a scandal involving O Wansu having an affair to deflect from the corporation's involvement. The mother-in-law deliberately arranged for O Wansu and Du Yun to visit a countryside resort to organize the resort's first anniversary event. They were also supposed to participate in a photo shoot to dispel divorce rumors and promote O Wansu's charity work locally. On the day they were set to leave, Du Yun drove O Wansu along the coast. As she gazed at the stunning ocean, her spirits began to lift. When the wind nearly blew away her scarf, Du Yun caught it and carefully tied it back for her. At a scenic spot by the sea, they embraced joyfully, unaware that a female bodyguard nearby had taken a picture of the moment. The bodyguard followed them back to their residence, while Lawyer Han delayed O Wansu's husband from joining them under the guise of business. That evening, Du Yun escorted O Wansu back to her room. Filled with regret, O Wansu hugged him from behind. Despite their mutual feelings, she had to keep her emotions in check until the situation calmed down. Later, following Lawyer Han's orders, the female bodyguard tried to harm O Wansu and framed Du Yun by planting his fingerprints on the weapon. The bodyguard attacked O Wansu while Du Yun was outside, but O Wansu managed to escape with great effort. Sensing something was wrong, Du Yun arrived just in time and told O Wansu to jump out of the window. He then fought the bodyguard. Both were equally matched, but the bodyguard, armed with a knife, managed to injure Du Yun and knock him onto some glass. She then went after O Wansu, who barely escaped onto a yacht at the seaside, but the bodyguard found her. She pushed O Wansu down, causing her to hit her head and lose consciousness. Desperate, Du Yun subdued the bodyguard and kicked her off the yacht. Injured but determined, Du Yun fought the bodyguard with a knife, finally wounding her and knocking her into the sea, ending the threat. Exhausted and hurt, he steered the yacht toward the open sea for safety. The next day, Du Yun woke up and, after checking that O Wansu was unharmed, finally relaxed. Having survived this life-threatening ordeal, they embraced and shared a passionate kiss. Back at their residence, O Wansu tended to Du Yun's injuries, feeling deeply hurt by his suffering. They discussed the attack, realizing that it was likely connected to the original ledgers. The mastermind behind the scenes was still unknown, but it was clear that Lawyer Han, the mother-in-law's confidant, had directed the secret funds back to her. Lawyer Han's actions hinted at hidden motives. To gather more information, Du Yun suggested that O Wansu start by questioning her husband about his relationship with his younger brother, which was likely strained due to inheritance disputes. They also needed to uncover the truth behind her father-in-law's death. Soon after, her husband arrived. O Wansu briefly explained the previous night's events to him, and then the couple participated in a magazine photo shoot. Later, following Du Yun's advice, O Wansu questioned her husband and discovered that her brother-in-law was actually her mother-in-law's illegitimate child, unloved by his parents since childhood. Regarding the death of O Wansu's father-in-law, her husband only remembered it as a disgraceful incident and knew nothing else. Now, apart from Lawyer Han, no one knew that O Wansu's father-in-law had made a will abroad. The will was set to be disclosed on a specific day. He had made these arrangements because he saw through Lawyer Han's deceitful nature and knew that O Wansu's brother-in-law was actually the son of his wife and Lawyer Han. Lawyer Han had used his connections to bribe the attorney who drafted the will, revealing that a large sum of money under the father-in-law's name would eventually go to O Wansu's consortium. When O Wansu's mother-in-law learned about this, she decided to leak intimate photos of O Wansu and Do Yoon to force a divorce, allowing her to take control of the consortium and the funds. Soon, the scandal of O Wansu's alleged affair was all over the news. Her husband, realizing that his mother had orchestrated the tracking and release of the photos despite knowing about O Wansu and Do Yoon's relationship, was furious. Although he had no intention of leaving her, he had always resented his mother, having witnessed her affair with Lawyer Han as a child. Despite this, his mother showed no remorse. This childhood trauma had shaped his view of love. He loved O Wansu, but didn't know how to nurture their relationship, even viewing infidelity as not particularly unforgivable. The couple grew increasingly distant, and overhearing their conversation, the lover realized that the husband's heart belonged solely to O Wansu. This left her feeling isolated and humiliated. Heartbroken, she took their child and returned to her parents' home. Meanwhile, Lawyer Han arranged for O Wansu's brother to be released on bail to retrieve the original ledgers from Do Yoon. Now focusing on Lawyer Han as a suspect, Do Yoon sneaked into his home again. Previously, he had hidden a surveillance device inside an alarm clock, and upon retrieving the memory card, he discovered the safe's combination from the video footage. After entering the correct numbers, he found several important documents inside the safe, including a trust certificate listing Lawyer Han as the settler and O Wansu's brother-in-law as the beneficiary. Do Yoon speculated that Lawyer Han's significant support for O Wansu's brother-in-law suggested a father-son relationship. After photographing the documents, he quickly returned everything to its place and left unnoticed, just as O Wansu's husband arrived to speak with Lawyer Han. Returning to his room, Do Yoon found it ransacked. O Wansu's brother had been ordered to find the original ledger earlier. They had agreed to use the ledger to expose the mastermind behind the scenes. Concerned about retaliation, the brother warned Do Yoon that if anything happened to him, he should go see his wife, where he had left something important. Now, Do Yoon was certain that Lawyer Han was the criminal mastermind, but he needed solid evidence to take him down. O Wansu's husband also suspected that Lawyer Han might have been involved in his father's death, but lacked proof. During his visit with Lawyer Han, he confronted the fact that his brother was the illegitimate child of his mother and Lawyer Han. Lawyer Han had been a servant in the family, and having a child with him was a lifelong embarrassment for his mother, causing her to be cold toward the other son. The brother knew who his real father was, but pretended otherwise, seeing Lawyer Han merely as a servant. After their conversation, the husband warned Lawyer Han not to harm O Wansu, or he would make him pay. After leaving Lawyer Han's place, the husband had Director Park bring Do Yoon to him, armed with a rifle. He questioned Do Yoon about any relationship with O Wansu. Do Yoon denied it and explained that he was simply O Wansu's bodyguard, mentioning that her father-in-law might have been murdered. Just then, O Wansu arrived and found her husband threatening Do Yoon. She immediately grabbed the rifle, pointing it at herself, urging her husband to regain his senses and let Do Yoon handle the investigation. Persuaded by O Wansu, her husband calmed down. 2 weeks later, the legal team appointed by O Wansu's father-in-law arrived at the mansion to disclose the contents of his will. He had 18 trillion won in assets, all donated to a foundation, with 16 trillion stored in a Swiss bank. Only O Wansu could withdraw the money by signing at the bank herself. At this revelation, O Wansu's husband laughed while she prepared to travel to Switzerland with him. Meanwhile, Do Yoon was left alone in the luxury house and accidentally bumped into a female bodyguard. She was a personal bodyguard assigned to O Wansu by her mother-in-law. Skilled and agile, she quickly caught Do Yoon's water bottle with her left hand. In that moment, he felt she resembled the person who had killed his friend, both in action and appearance, leading him to suspect her as the killer. Meanwhile, the O Wansu couple arrived at the Swiss bank. After passing through multiple security systems, they finally met with an executive from the grandfather's estate. Using biometric fingerprint identification, the executive confirmed O Wansu's identity and led them to the vault. Among the funds, 16 trillion won was illegal secret money, while the remaining 2 trillion was in illegal nominee accounts. To successfully withdraw the money, certain maneuvers were necessary. The mother-in-law intended for O Wansu's husband to inherit this money and take control of the conglomerate, while the younger brother-in-law wanted to split it 3 ways. However, only O Wansu's husband remained clear-headed. According to the will, the money now belonged to O Wansu's conglomerate, meaning only she could use it. The younger brother-in-law, fixated on the money, insisted on getting a share, threatening that without it, there would never be peace in the family. O Wansu's husband, unfazed by the threats, calmly stated that their father might have been murdered and suggested that their mother and brother might know more than they were letting on. Upon hearing this, they were too shocked to respond. O Wansu's husband made it clear that he would not allow his father's money to fall into anyone else's hands. The younger brother-in-law was furious and immediately consulted Lawyer Han. If O Wansu could just withdraw the money from the bank and vanish, he could inherit his father's estate. Lawyer Han agreed to help the younger brother-in-law, but recalled a chilling memory. O Wansu's father had been found in a pool of blood, and when Lawyer Han arrived, the room was in disarray, with the younger brother-in-law standing by the body, panicking and clutching a blood-stained gold bar while insisting that his father had merely fainted. Lawyer Han had told him to leave immediately and hide. That day, when Chief Park was called to clean up the scene, Lawyer Han trembled with emotion, sobbing uncontrollably. Do-yoon revealed to O Wansu's siblings that Lawyer Han and the younger brother-in-law were actually father and son, with the younger brother-in-law being an illegitimate child lacking inheritance rights who had targeted the conglomerate. Do-yoon suspected that the mastermind behind the attempts on O Wansu's life might be this father-son duo. He warned O Wansu to be wary of the personal female bodyguard sent by her mother-in-law and advised her never to be alone with her, as she could be associated with Lawyer Han and had previously sought opportunities to harm O Wansu since Manila. After their discussions, Do-yoon returned the stolen original ledger of the conglomerate to O Wansu's brother for safekeeping. That evening, the brother informed Do-yoon that he had arranged a meeting with Lawyer Han at a secluded spot by the river. Before leaving, Do-yoon noticed the suspicious female bodyguard preparing to go out as well. Upon arriving at the river, Do-yoon recorded the conversation with O Wansu's brother on his phone and secretly filmed the meeting using nearby surveillance cameras. Lawyer Han exchanged the ledger for a bank transfer, but the brother insisted on ensuring O Wansu's safety. Lawyer Han told him to stay out of it and drove away, and in the next moment, the brother was dead. Taking advantage of the darkness, Do-yoon stabbed the assailant in the back. The attacker fought desperately to escape, but Do-yoon stayed behind to apply pressure to the brother's wound and called for emergency services. Despite the doctor's efforts, O Wansu's brother could not be saved. Do-yoon suspected that the true identity of the killer was the female bodyguard who had repeatedly tried to kill both him and O Wansu, but he couldn't figure out who was orchestrating it all. Upon hearing of her brother's death, O Wansu broke down in tears in front of Do-yoon. Meanwhile, Lawyer Han made a call to the prosecutor's office, reporting the Wayne Group and the conglomerate. O Wansu's mother-in-law, who received a subpoena, was at a loss. Lawyer Han was unreachable until dawn when he returned, insisting to O Wansu's mother-in-law that it was O Wansu's brother who had turned the ledger over to the authorities and that she needed to accompany him for a brief questioning. After the questioning, as they left the prosecutor's office, Lawyer Han discussed the inheritance of the group with her, asking if their younger brother had any rights. Hearing this, the mother-in-law laughed, saying no one would hand over a company to a mistress's child. Lawyer Han smiled knowingly and handed over the acquired ledger to the prosecutor, which led to the mother-in-law being taken in by the authorities. While the mother-in-law was being investigated, O Wansu attended her brother's funeral. Afterward, her brother's will was presented, and she received a USB drive from Do-yoon containing tampered financial evidence related to the conglomerate, a task entrusted to her by her husband. That night, Do-yoon discreetly placed the USB drive in Lawyer Han's safe and reported the brother's will to the authorities, hoping they would uncover the evidence and convict Lawyer Han. Soon after, prosecutors arrived at Lawyer Han's home, seizing everything, including the safe with the USB. While they were busy, Do-yoon noticed the sneaky female bodyguard and followed her to her room, where she was preparing to escape. Holding her at gunpoint, he struggled with her. Despite her injuries, she was no match for Do-yoon, who quickly subdued her. As he tore open her clothing, he discovered a wound on her back that matched the knife wound he had inflicted on the killer, confirming that she was responsible for O Wansu's brother's death. Do-yoon captured the female bodyguard and retrieved the USB drive, which contained video evidence of her killing O Wansu's brother. The injury on her back would be enough to convict her. He handed her over to the police, and as she struggled, she looked up and saw Lawyer Han on the second floor. Following her gaze, Do-yoon confronted Lawyer Han, confirming that he was the mastermind behind the bodyguard's actions. Lawyer Han calmly told Do-yoon to come at him and left, laughing, having already plotted his escape. Lawyer Han dug up blood-stained gold bars from the yard and brought them to O Wansu's mother-in-law, who anxiously awaited his assistance. However, Lawyer Han was evasive, claiming he was trying to help. Sensing his attitude, the mother-in-law realized he was the one who had implicated her. Angered by this betrayal, she criticized Lawyer Han, who had lived comfortably thanks to her, yet now stabbed her in the back. Offended by being referred to as a servant, Lawyer Han disliked her superior attitude. He had fathered her younger brother-in-law to see her reaction to having a child with someone deemed lowly. Lawyer Han presented the blooded gold bars, the murder weapon used by the younger brother-in-law. If he turned them over to the authorities without revealing his paternity, the younger brother-in-law would be labeled the murderer. Otherwise, the affair between the mother-in-law and Lawyer Han would be exposed. Lawyer Han offered her a way out. If she took the blame for hiring someone to kill O Wansu, he would keep their secret. Valuing her reputation, she silently accepted the crime. Lawyer Han thought his plan was foolproof until the younger brother-in-law, going through a tumultuous divorce, tore up the agreement and refused to leave. Inheriting his mother's instability, he became enraged at the slightest provocations. He ordered all staff out of the house, fetched a shotgun from the basement, and aimed it at O Wansu's husband. Dissatisfied that his brother didn't share the secret funds, he fired a warning shot. Hearing the gunshot, O Wansu left the mansion, while Lawyer Han followed the sound to calm his son, who disrespectfully told him to leave. O Wansu's husband, amused, commented on the resemblance between father and son. Tired of being treated like a servant, Lawyer Han took the gun, intending to intervene. In the ensuing struggle, another gunshot was heard. O Wansu, outside, instinctively covered her head and went back inside. The younger brother-in-law picked up the gun and shot his brother twice. O Wansu screamed and rushed to her husband, calling him husband, a term she hadn't used in a long time. Before his death, he confessed his love for her, unsure how to express it. He had decided to genuinely mend their relationship, cutting ties with his mistress by offering her 100 billion won as severance. If more was needed, he was willing to find the funds. However, he ultimately lost the chance to stay by O Wansu's side as he closed his eyes for the last time. Lawyer Han quickly devised a plan to pin the murder on O Wansu. He ordered his younger brother-in-law to leave the scene immediately and deleted the surveillance footage. After his son left, Lawyer Han calmly wiped the fingerprints from the gun and then accused O Wansu of killing her husband. O Wansu was taken to the station for questioning. Do-yoon arrived and persuaded the police to grant him a few minutes with her. After O Wansu was taken away, Do-yoon began searching for evidence. The surveillance footage had been formatted, but he instructed his team to find the younger brother-in-law, whose car was still in the parking lot and had not been recorded. After leaving, Do-yoon searched every room and noticed clothes caught in a wardrobe door. He opened it and pinned the younger brother-in-law to the bed, ensuring there were traces of gunpowder on his hands. The police later found gunpowder residue on him, and the deleted footage was restored, proving O Wansu was outside when the shots were fired. The evidence was conclusive, and the younger brother-in-law couldn't escape. Next, it was time to take legal action against Lawyer Han, who had meanwhile solidified his position as a temporary executive of the Wei Group by bribing shareholders. Do-yoon analyzed the situation. The mother-in-law admitted to instructing the female bodyguard to attack O Wansu, confirming a transaction between them. Assuming she wouldn't hand over a ledger obtained through murder, it must have been Lawyer Han who reported her after acquiring the ledger, establishing his employment relationship with the bodyguard. Do-yoon confronted Lawyer Han, pointing out that his unnecessary reporting of the mother-in-law, intended to bring her down, had instead exposed him as the bodyguard's employer. Just then, the prosecutor arrived and took lawyer Han away on charges of incitement to murder. The female bodyguard was confirmed to have killed Soon's friend and O Wansu's brother, and had also attacked O Wansu recently. The prosecutor opened lawyer Han's safe and found the USB drive inside, which became key evidence for his conviction. After resolving everything, Do-yoon submitted his resignation, and they embraced and said goodbye, each returning to their own paths. O Wansu's mother-in-law was cleared of murder charges, but continued to face legal consequences for other crimes. During her release, she visited her younger son and warned him about lawyer Han's threats regarding the gold bars, advising him never to trust him. Furious, the younger brother-in-law confronted lawyer Han, upset at being looked down upon because of his father. Realizing that lawyer Han had betrayed him too, he intended to kill him, but was restrained by prison guards. Seeing his son's hatred, lawyer Han felt his life was a failure. A year later, O Wansu continued her global travels, using the conglomerate's money to aid the impoverished. She routinely traveled abroad with volunteers and encountered Do-yoon at the airport. Starting today, he would join her in exploring every corner of the world. So guys, this is the conclude of the story. Now we will meet in the next videos. Till then, take care and watch another cool videos.